Look at that.
Stay right there, Lulu. Stay. Over here. Look. Good girl.
Attention. All right, she knows I need your attention, and so she's, yeah. All right. This is going to be perfect for the outtake, so we're going to start, but we can't start because the dog still wants to play catch.
Oh, is it already recording?
Yeah,
Okay.
there we are.
Okay.
Welcome back. It's another episode of The Calling, and I'm excited because I have a longtime friend of mine, Wendy Carrillo, is here.
Hi, everyone.
Wendy, tell everybody what your current job title is for those that don't know.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I am the representative in the California State Assembly for the 51st Assembly District, which includes the communities of Northeast Los Angeles and East LA.
Okay. So you and I met long before that, right?
Yes.
And we were both working at Power 106, right?
Mm-hmm.
The giant hip hop station in Los Angeles. And you, what was the first thing you were doing there when we met?
So I was, that was 2005.
Ooh.
A long time ago. And I had just been hired to be the executive producer and host of the Knowledge is Power show.
Right.
Which was the community affairs, public affairs, politics show. Yeah. And so you would bring me on the morning show to just give us an update as to what's going on.
We needed a political correspondent that could put two sentences together better than us sometimes.
Just
you know?
two.
At least two. So, so Wendy started as our political correspondent, and look at that. Today, she's a big wig in frickin' Sacramento, making shit happen.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I am one of 80 members in the California State Assembly.
Yeah.
And I have to say that when I was doing the political correspondence work, I was like, yes, one day this is going to help me run for office. It was totally set it up.
Your path doesn't surprise me at all. But yeah, I would see you in short doses. Mm-hmm. But then, you would go off and you'd be doing your thing, and the next thing it's like, hey guys, I'm running for office. Could you help me out? And talking about it a little, and it's just like, of course, just because I'm such a political junkie, which is of course why my hair falls out, because it's so unforgiving, and it just it can make you crazy.
But there's so much has happened since then till now.
Well, it's completely different than when you were bright-eyed, starting the idea of wanting to get in it. But even for me, I feel that it so much has changed with it, but also, I so adored you because you were somebody who was completely community grown. Mm-hmm. You were in it for the right reason, thinking small but acting big. And when we see people running for office, it's always who's supporting them, who's backing them, what's the real money behind this, the Koch brothers, but with you, I was like, this is how politics should be. It should be someone who's from the community, that knows the community, mm-hmm. that actually, wants to make things better. And I have, and so I always had great respect for you, and I was so happy when you won. So tell me a little bit, the jump from, radio correspondent mm-hmm. to in office.
So all of those things, right? Homegrown, Boyle Heights, East LA. And there's a difference when you want to do something for your community that you love. It comes from the heart. It doesn't come from a place of wanting to just be in office or be a career politician. It's about identifying what can I do? What is my role to help? And so, 12 years in radio, and then making the transition over to, I had started doing pundit work at some of the cable news shows at that time, and we got a chance to interview Obama a few times.
Who?
Our former president, Mr. Barack Obama.
That's one of my really dorky little claims to fame, is that I've spoken to 2 presidents and 1 Secretary of State.
Which Secretary of State?
Hillary.
Oh, wow.
It would almost be 3 presidents.
Almost.
Right? Almost. But
so Obama was like like a lot of young people are inspired by Bernie today. Obama was that for me.
Yeah.
I was, I think, 26 years old at the time, and just felt like with Obama we were building something. We were building towards something.
Mm-hmm.
And what I feel now, it's about breaking things apart and like dismantling systems that don't
I mean, that was literally part of Trump's platform.
To tear it all apart?
Yeah, Steve Bannon and his cronies would literally say, we have to break Washington in order to rebuild it. Well, they've done a great job on breaking
what
things.
What did they say? Drain the swamp?
Right.
That was the thing. So, but
when are they going to start that?
Oh, I don't know.
Sorry, this is not going to be a nonpartisan show.
But to answer your question, so I did all that, and then in 2016 in August, around my birthday, I was working for a startup, and that was put on hold. And I decided I'm gonna rent a car, and me and my dog are gonna travel across the country.
Right, you're gonna hear Lulu from time to time.
And we're just gonna go talk to people.
Yeah.
Right. And so I brought back like my little recorder, from my street recorder, right, and traveled the country. Went from LA to New Orleans, and then from New Orleans all the way up to Standing Rock, North Dakota.
Okay.
And I was gonna be at Standing Rock for 2 weeks. Is what I had measured in my plan. And I ended up staying close to 3 months. And this was the Standing Rock, North Dakota Access Pipeline fight.
Yes.
And there were 10,000 people or more camped out at Standing Rock, at the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. And I was one of them. And I ended up staying there for the duration of what was called, winterizing and all that. And I was wearing my press pass, and I was pitching stories to radio and to other news agencies, and I got tear gassed and hit with a flash grenade, and I saw them coming, right? And everyone was peaceful. And so what was this like military type agency that was doing this? Because it wasn't just the local police. And why was this happening on this particular space in this particular time? Obama was still in office.
Right.
The election hadn't happened yet. And I remember waking up the next morning. One, I was super scared, right? Because I've never experienced anything like that. And
it is scary.
I remember hearing like the elders being tear gassed and people crying, and I had to pour like milk of magnesia in this like young girl's eyes that had gotten tear gas in her eyes, and it was just like this war zone thing that I was experiencing at Standing Rock.
Right. And
went back to my tent and woke up the next morning just feeling completely changed and resilient and like unafraid of anything. Then the election happens and Trump is elected.
Yeah.
And it just created this like ripple of effect. And so my congressman, Javier Becerra, became the Attorney General for the state of California. It opened up a special congressional seat election. That's when I ran for the congressional seat.
Right.
Came close, didn't win, and then was like, what am I doing with my life? And then decided to run for the open vacant state assembly seat. And I was the only woman that ran against 11 other men and came out the winner.
Yeah.
That was it.
Hell yeah, you did. Hell yeah,
3 years later, here we are.
Right. So now how long is the term for that office?
So it's a total of a 12-year term
Uh-huh.
running every 2 years.
Okay.
So there is term limits in California, so I get the opportunity to serve.
So every 2 years you run to renew basically
Yes.
up to 6 times.
Yes, to keep the position.
Got it. Okay. All right. And so
Yeah.
and so what does that mean now versus for people that don't like understand like what that actually means. So you're representing a community,
Mm-hmm.
right, in Los Angeles, but the work is in Sacramento at times. So how does that actually like work?
So every assembly seat, and there's a total of 80 across the state, represents about 500,000 people, constituents. And between January through either August or September, depending on the year, most of the work is done in Sacramento because that's our state capital. And so we have to fly. We have to have 2 residencies. We have to have the residency at home where we live and where we represent.
Yeah.
And then we have to have a place to live in Sacramento.
Right.
So it's...
Well, it's a good thing you're rich. Right?
Sure. And Sacramento is getting more and more expensive every day. And so it is an issue of like, can you afford to do this job? Right? Do you need to come from money to be able to afford to do these positions of public service?
That's where the rub starts.
Yeah. And then there's a lot of like just hardship and sacrifice and being away from family, and I can't even imagine. So I'm single, I don't have children, but I can imagine if you are a young parent or if you have children, like how do you even compromise leaving your family at home and then traveling to Sacramento for more than half the week and then having to come back on the weekends and then do all the weekend work that's necessary too.
Right.
So it's a sacrifice.
For sure.
Yeah, I have a colleague who just had triplets, such as 3 babies at home, and having to travel back and forth from her residency in Southern California all the way up to Sacramento.
That's a handful and a half right there. Wow.
Yeah.
What surprised you the most from let's go after your election. So you get elected and then you get to Sacramento in some way, shape, or form. Like what about the process has surprised you the most?
There's so how much time do we have?
We have as much time as you got.
There's so much. I think what's been surprising the most is the power of what is called the lobbying core. The individuals that represent the special interest, whether they're large corporations or advocacy groups, and the power that they have to influence legislation, to influence votes.
So examples of that could be like companies with tons of money behind tobacco or oil or energy, other forms of energy, right? And they've got these gazillions of dollars, of however they make their money, and then they try and get people to persuade to make legislation that goes their way.
It is literally the big corporations versus the little guy in many cases, because they're the ones that have all the money, and then the little guys don't necessarily always do. And so it's their fights. And so when you have term limits, here's the rub in that you don't have the long-term institutional knowledge to know what happened 10 years ago. So the legislators leave, and before, just this all changed, it was only 6 years. So imagine being only there 6 years while the lobbying groups or the individuals that lobby can stay there an entire career.
Right, yeah. Because they're not elected, obviously.
They're not elected,
and
so
rules.
Exactly. So their influence, their knowledge, their institutional knowledge is much is deeper than the legislators that are coming up and learning certain positions for the first time.
Yeah.
Right? You run on ideals and values and what you care about, and then you realize there's a whole other world of other things that you have very little knowledge of.
Well,
you're relying on other people to help you.
Right, which is tough when their currency is money and manipulation.
Yeah.
I mean, right? I mean, that's basically the gig, right? Is that they're getting paid big bucks
to
get
achieve something.
Exactly.
Or not achieve something.
Right.
Kill something.
Or to make something go away.
Yeah, to make something go away.
Yeah.
So
what's an example of, something that that has happened for your community that you're proud of?
So I'm the eldest of 5 daughters, and my parents worked full time and try to, provide for the family. So after school programs were really important to me and to my sisters, and they're important to a lot of families across the state. So it's one of the first things that we got involved in, and we were able to allocate an additional $50 million in after school funding to ensure that programs in schools didn't shut down. So the state did this incredible thing that the state said, we are going to increase our minimum wage to $15 an hour, right? But at the same time, did not increase the funding for salaries. So it's just kind of like let's look at all the details to ensure that programs aren't shutting down because you can't afford to pay people anymore.
Right.
And we want to make sure that after school programs are accessible to everyone that needs them.
Yeah.
So that was a big win, and something that I think right now, especially during COVID, how do we ensure that kids across the state and in my community also have access to resources, and that they're learning how to read and they're learning how to write and they're not getting behind in their coursework.
Yeah. It's outside the scope of what I thought, our conversation, would be today. But just in general, we have no idea what the long-lasting effects of this quarantine are going to be when it comes to children, with how long they're not around friends, how long they're not, truly accountable with the classroom setting, and they're in the pajamas and dicking around, on Zoom, and you know what I mean? We don't even know yet. It's like
we can take a guess, though.
We can take a guess for sure, but it hasn't even finished yet. Is part of my point. So we don't even know what the end is to which we're going to need to pick up or clean up. They've spent so much time and money on, oh my God, we got to get sports back, and we got to, even with that, okay, you got players that all were in Florida playing basketball, and then, all the way through the NBA finals, and Lakers won, go Lakers. But
and then we're going to have the Dodgers soon.
Yeah, well, right, yeah. As of right now, Dodgers are going on. But even with that, right, the players were there and some camera crew but there wasn't a single hot dog vendor. There wasn't a single person selling a hat. So all of the working class jobs were still gone. Every arena basically is closed or severely, limited. So even when I feel like we see something is coming back to normal, well, but for who? And that's kind of my point about with the children as well, is I'm like, okay, but are they getting any extra funding to make sure that every kid actually has Wi-Fi and a computer? And I mean, you probably saw that story about the kids that were sitting in the parking lot at Taco Bell so that they could get Wi-Fi, right?
Would you see the follow-up story to that? Was that they
wanted to take the kids away.
They had social services go and visit the moms and take the kids away,
This is, and again, I'm not a right-wing government's the problem guy, no. But things can get messy when there's so many and nobody knows all the frickin' rules at once. We don't know all, so it's like.
And every county is different, and every region is different.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, again, one of the most surprising things when it comes to education that I learned going up to Sacramento was, if a child does not read at grade level by 3rd grade, it's almost as if they're already on track to a school to prison pipeline. The prison system knows how many beds it's going to need based on 3rd grade reading levels. And that is fact. And there are plenty of education advocacy groups that do incredible work that track that.
Right.
That have it as something that we should take a look at in a very serious way, because you lose them.
Yep.
And then you begin to just kind of graduate them up, and they never get to catch up. And then by 8th grade, they're dropping out. And what are the chances that they're going to be able to get a good job, earn a living, rent an apartment, do all the things that they need, versus ending up in prison?
Yep. It's interesting you say that for a couple of reasons. It's interesting on its own, but the way that story touches me as well is so... backing up, you talked about after-school programs. That was like my very first, career, right? I started working in after-school programs even when I was 14. When I was
didn't know that.
See, look at that. I taught Wendy something today for once. I went in the field and then I left the field instantly after 1 year. Was because now I was working in Orange County, California, which is a very nice area, but they just were pushing kids through because they wanted to make their numbers. And I did not agree with that. And these kids, and again, we were a rich school district, Irvine Unified. We had all the resources, but still they were more concerned about the politics of the percentages of kids passing through than actually telling the truth that this child would be better served by repeating or by, summer school or something like that. And when I saw that, and knowing my personality, because I'm a bull, I'm like, I can't be here because I'm going to get into some trouble. They don't want to hear what I have to say. And so so my political advocacy and my fire has absolutely gone in different ways, but I knew I couldn't fix it from inside the house, is basically my point. And so, and third grade, just even hearing you say that, it just took me back, and it's just it aches my heart a bit.
So imagine during COVID, if you don't have access to a good device like an iPad, a laptop, whatever, you don't have access to the internet because the digital divide is very real. Then how are you even getting the resources, right? Goes back to those two little girls at the Taco Bell parking lot. The movie Stand and Deliver?
Yes, of course.
Right? Iconic movie. There's a couple of scenes, but in East LA at Garfield High School, which I represent in the California State Assembly, it's my district. And there's a scene where there's a young woman who's, I don't know, a junior maybe. She's like 16. And she's trying to do her homework, and she has all her little brothers and sisters running around the house, and she goes to the bathroom, and it's like she's doing homework in the bathroom, right? That scenario has not changed.
No.
And that was in the 80s.
Right.
That's still happening today, and even more so, because at least then it was a book. Now it's like a tablet. Now it's internet. Now it's accessing Google and figuring all that out. And if you don't have that, then you're already steps behind.
And, you add the extra monkey wrench of the teacher isn't watching you. Now, a parent, if they still have their job, can't go to their job because you can't leave your 6-year-old at home alone. So then what? So, I mean,
we are going to have a whole generation of children that are going to need, and kids in general, and I'm also thinking about junior high and high school, that are just going to need more help and more resources. Imagine if you've done everything right until now and you were a star athlete at your high school, and you're ready to get that scholarship to go play in college, and then all of that has also just stopped.
Right. But that's one of the things I find heartbreaking about it as well. And, why the backlog in Washington, of saying, don't give people $600 a week because they're going to get so comfortable, they're not going to want to work again. You fucking, so stupid, right? But literally what that is code for is we don't care about, the people that don't have this level of money. That's what that really means. Because to that same point, school was supposed to be, some days better than not, an equal playing field. Meaning, if you've got 25 kids in the class, and one's a star athlete, and one's a smarty pants, and whatever, they all were going to have the opportunity to get the same focused education. Versus now, the household that both parents are millionaires and are available to be at home, they'll have the best equipment, because
their own rooms.
Yes, right?
Yeah. If you're lucky enough
to be
have
uninterrupted,
yeah.
right? Versus single parent household, and you didn't already have, the now, because you have to stay home, you are knocked completely down the ladder. And it's not at all equal now in the education that you're trying to get. So,
right.
Yeah, so many disturbing things about this. And again, it just further,
And what about kids and families that are like the most marginalized that still get free or reduced lunch at school?
Yes.
Many families going hungry at night. And the problem lies in, if the federal government can bail out a corporation, it can certainly help out the American people.
Of course.
And that is the big difference that we're not seeing right now. And there's just so much to do. And it's very easy to become disillusioned. It's very easy to say, my vote doesn't matter, it's fine, whatever. But what we said back then, since we were doing the show up until now, it's like if you don't exercise your right to vote, you're literally allowing somebody else to make a decision for you.
It's true, and for California, that lesson, more matters on your, community basis and more about like the propositions. In general, again, don't hit me, but in general, your vote in California doesn't matter as much, in the sense that California is not going to flip-flop its direction on who they're voting for president. Like, California is bluer than blue, bluer than the Dodgers. So, like, that part kind of isn't at play. What is at play is what happens in individual communities and things like that.
Sure, your local city council, your school board, your judges, your sheriff,
all of that.
The propositions are a great example of what's going to happen in California.
Right.
So, yeah.
And so when people talk about that, like, again, I think, and not to go all the way to, we'll do like electoral college or something maybe on another episode, but people get confused too when George W. Bush became president, but he had less votes. Donald Trump became president, but he actually had less votes. So wait, what the fuck are we talking about, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't understand exactly how things work, and the fact that truly somebody's vote in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin did actually mean more than your vote in this last election, it's confusing and it's not right, and it's a whole nother like conversation. But especially tell people that in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida,
Texas, Nevada, Arizona.
Please tell them to get out and vote.
It's exciting that more and more people are voting, though.
It is,
and even during COVID, people are still out, and they're
Isn't it wild? Like, as of today, I believe I saw today when we're recording this is the 19th, so we're 12, 15 days basically from the election, I believe as of today they said 25 million ballots have already been cast. So it's pretty wild, and that's like 25 times the normal rate. Like normally at this point, I think they say we'd be at 1 million or 1.5 million or something like that. So I think it's great. But again, voting is only the start. And still, being active in your community and following up and keeping your representatives accountable and actually showing up for, town hall meetings or things like that. All of that stuff, matters. But also, back to what I was, describing with the school, and like, some people don't have time to do any of that shit too. Like it's.
Well, that's where for me, it's been like a lesson of pay attention to the social media chatter, but it doesn't represent the majority of folks who are simply trying to live their lives.
Absolutely.
I think about my parents, right? My parents aren't on Twitter and hashtagging and all that. They are hardworking, essential workers.
Yeah.
Who are risking their lives every day to continue to do the work that makes the society move forward, and you have to pay attention to that.
Yeah.
Like, so in the same spot, if you, like, I would recommend anybody that wants to engage politically, it's one thing to do it on social media. It's quite another to call the office of your representative and actually say, I live in this community. These are my concerns. I am putting you on notice that I'm reaching out to you directly. Two completely different ways of engaging.
Yes. So yes, and engaging politically on social media doesn't do shit. So don't think that you did something because you pushed a like button. Fuck that.
Or you shared something.
It doesn't mean anything. And for me personally, it's so annoying, and there's been so many like friendships like, bruised for me personally, even over, what's gone on in the past 5 years, that the past, I don't know, like 4 months or something, I said, I'm not going to engage anything. And it's been really difficult.
Yeah.
But I'm like, it's not helping anything, so I'm not going to actually post or do anything on social about the election. I have done other things very specifically. I've worked with a group volunteering and donating specifically in Ohio, just about, because again, in California, I knew my work here is limited. So I'm like, okay, well, let me do something because I'm passionate, where I can make a difference. But let's talk about that a little bit more. So how can people who are upset with the system do something that actually will make a difference that is not social media?
And that's the way in which you engage, right? So there's the local ways that you can engage, but if you're thinking about the presidential right now and everything that's happening, I believe that we live in a flawed system in which the people that sit on the Supreme Court get to stay there for lifelong terms.
Yep.
And so, God rest her soul, RBG,
yep.
right? Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away. And it is up to the one individual in the White House to make a decision based on Congress on who this next appointment is going to be.
Right.
So how does the death of one person impact millions of people across the United States for the rest of our lives? Right. And that is the biggest appointment that is going to happen in our lifetime.
Yes.
It already happened when Judge Scalia passed away, and like somebody had to be appointed, and Obama held back and said and gave more time. That's not happening now. And so
because the people now don't care about rules. I mean, Mitch McConnell was laughing during his debate when Amy McGrath was talking about how many people have died of COVID and you didn't give relief. And he's laughing. I mean, he literally looks like a villain from a 1930s movie. Like, there's just some... There's just some really shitty people that have too much control right now. And
it's hard to engage. It's a lot to take on. So I would just advise, don't get disillusioned with the system. Find ways to get involved in battleground states. Yeah. Like Ohio that you're doing, or Florida, Texas, pick something. Yeah. I'm working very closely with friends and colleagues to do Latino voter outreach in battleground states, to make sure that English speakers and Spanish speakers are aware and know and come out and vote and exercise this incredible thing that we are able to do in our democracy. But yeah, California on lock for the presidency.
Right. Now, what is it though when we're seeing like polls that show like Biden is doing worse in some Latino communities than Hillary did, because I know like you can't just say a culture of people are myopic and they only vote and do something one way.
It's okay.
What is it? So I know that you can't say that people of a certain culture like all vote the same way, but how can you explain how much Trump has support in the Latin community? What is that?
Florida in particular too.
Well, Florida's different, and Florida's always a weird place. But in general, I mean, it is, because it's weird. You've got all these old white people that are going down there to, the sunbirds, right? And then you've got, the Cuban population. And so, I mean, there's such a mix. And it always seems that, like, I mean, as long as I've been alive, it seems like Florida is always like 49-49, and you'll see, like, who's going to win it. It's always neck and neck. But just in general, and again, polls don't mean everything, but, like, the African American vote is very strongly for Biden. You will find some anomalies, yes. But the Latino vote is not in the same place as the African American vote. So I'm just curious, like, what have you experienced with people that are in your community or in your culture, or friends or family that say, yeah, I like Captain Cheeto?
I would say
I'm paraphrasing.
I would say that the majority are with Biden.
Yeah.
The majority are Democrats. I think it just depends on what poll you're looking at and what state you're looking at. Latinos are we're not a monolithic group.
Correct.
It's incredibly diverse. And so the Mexican American community in the Southwest states, very different than the Caribbean community or Latino Caribbean community in the East Coast.
Yeah.
Even from Latino to Hispanic to Latinx to, like, all the things.
Right.
It's different. But I would say that the difference between the Latino community and the Black community is that the Latino community will always have a constant immigrant community. And so
elaborate on that.
Well, you have multi-generational Latinos in the United States,
yes,
right, that have been in this country before Texas was a part of the United States, right? Eva Longoria is an example of that. But then you have people like me who are new. I'm first generation. I was born somewhere else and came to the United States, became a naturalized citizen. And that will always be a thing, especially with the Latino community. The Black community, not necessarily, although there is now generational, and also the African American community in the United States have been able to build, like, generational wealth. It's taken a while. But you have things like the civil rights movement and Jim Crow and, like, all these things that we can historically point back to in terms of disenfranchisement.
Yes.
Those same things are still happening today to different communities.
Okay.
Right?
So
it's a constant evolution of identity, of the American experience, of involvement, of who's doing what type of labor.
Yeah.
Right, and it changes.
So let me ask the question in a different way. Have you had a conversation with somebody that you know in some way that is supportive of Trump?
Yes.
Okay. Now let's take that person and let's assume that they're a mentally good person that's functioning, right? Yes. So let's just assume that, right? That they're not just a nut job like they put on Jimmy Kimmel that doesn't know why they're at a rally, right? So what is a reason that this type of person gives that they like a Trump? I'm not brown, but I get upset for other people when I see how Trump treats people of color. So if you know somebody, like what's a reason that somebody gives that they are supportive? I just don't truly understand.
It's a variety of different things. So I got in an Uber in Miami with a Cuban American driver who was all about Trump. And it was just as, I think, a loyalty to the Republican Party. But also, and this is an article that recently came out, there's a sense of machismo that exists that Trump has that resonates.
That actually makes sense.
With some Latino men.
That actually makes sense.
Yeah. But I mean, the question is the same way, like, Trump won because the majority of white women voted for him, right?
Well, yeah, he won. Well, maybe he won. I'm still upset that Hillary didn't fight more. I feel like she gave up with all of the shit that still was unanswered with the Russian interference. You're telling me that it was impossible that they could have affected voting machines?
Well, that's the thing about Democrats,
in the few states. Like, I still am not convinced that he didn't win by the actual number of votes in the popular vote, but that's not how we elect a president.
Right,
he won electorally. But I'm not convinced even that's accurate. And I felt that they just kind of like let that go too easily. But none. Didn't
that happen with Gore as well? And
well,
the Chads and the thing.
Yeah, but we weren't. Well, again, this is why we need to do an episode fully on the Electoral College. But, but at least with Gore, now again, and then that's a whole can of worms too, because then who were the people that fought and took it to the Supreme Court, who now are the people that they're stacking on the Supreme Court to make sure that Republicans keep winning elections even when they don't get the votes. So, I forgot my point, but that's okay. So, the Machismo thing that actually makes a little bit of sense. But
I also wouldn't say that that's the majority of the Latino
community. No. It can't be. But it's just in general, and it happens on our show too. Like we get people that are, Latino for Trump, and I generally hear a real flawed, argument of oh, he's great for business or something like that, and it's really
whose business?
Yeah,
because the majority of American businesses are floundering right now. Small business or Main Street USA. It's not surviving COVID. No. And the way that he talks about your culture, and I'm like, is anyone paying attention? And then again, this is why I need to turn off, politics sometimes, because it's just, it's infuriating. But all of that being said, let's turn the page and talk about why we still have a way to be hopeful. There is a quote by John Adams that I live by, and it's
an old president.
Yes. So
from the 1700s, right? He was third, second president.
He wrote a love letter to his wife when he was trying to recruit funds for the Revolutionary War from France. And he wrote a love letter, and he said, the gardens here are beautiful, everything's amazing, but I must get back to the work at hand for the people. And he said, I'm kind of paraphrasing a little bit, but he said, I must study politics and war so that my sons have the liberty of studying mathematics and science, so that their sons have the freedom to study art and music. That, I think, to me, is the story of America. It is the promise of this country that we all get to live. It is your story, it is my story. It is how we choose to engage and the kind of country that we choose to build together that gives promise. So I think of my family. I think of my family fleeing the Civil War in El Salvador, coming to the U.S., starting new, leaving everything behind. My parents working hard to make sure that my sisters and I had resources, and I'm first generation college student, all the things. Grew up on the east side that now gets to have this position to be able to influence and do more for kids like me. And hopefully have a dent in our democracy to be able to influence and inspire and achieve hope that we can still achieve all those things. That didn't end with John Adams. It didn't end with a certain generation. That literal phrase that I get to do this so that generations later others will get to do more. That, I think, is the promise of this country, and that is what we need to fight for.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I agree
the romantic in me in the political space.
Well, but I mean, that's the old phrase, right? Democrats fall in love and Republicans fall in line, right? I mean,
is that the phrase?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow,
absolutely.
Okay.
Democrats have to fall in love with their candidate and their cause, and Republicans are more militaristic. Okay, just tell us where. Okay,
that's why they're also incredibly powerful. right?
Yeah.
They do fall in line. This is our dude. This is our guy.
Right.
And we're gonna do all the things necessary.
Regardless.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think even, you know, I mean, who would have ever thought in our lifetime that somebody would, you know, come into office that would make George W. Bush look good?
I just remember being such a fan of The Apprentice, right? Like way back in the day, 2001,
Yeah.
And now that this guy is now the president of the United States, it's just so surreal to me.
Yeah.
And there's so much at stake, but yeah.
Yeah. Wendy, I could talk to you for hours, and we will talk for hours on other episodes. But I just wanted to introduce you and talk about, again, as you know, this series is all about people that I know that are, you know, super passionate about what they do, and clearly she showed you that, right?
I tried.
So anyway,
I tried. There was a lot to cover.
Well, we've got more to talk about on another time. Where can people find you on social media?
Super easy. It's my name on Twitter. It's at Wendy Carrillo, RRL.
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 Don't get it wrong. Oh my God!
Instagram,
one time I spelled it wrong
Facebook.
in the studio, and she literally took a tennis racket to the back of my neck. And
I did not. No.
just kidding.
But easy.
Oh my God! She lost her seat because I told the tennis story.
Some violence.
Not at all. Wendy's amazing, as you clearly tell. All right. Thank you so much for joining another episode of The Calling. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.